Have you ever wondered if time really exists in the sky? This idea may seem absurd at first glance. After all, everything we know is bound by time. Seconds that slip away, memories that fade, cycles that begin and end. But what if I told you that in the divine plan, time might simply not exist? Or worse, it might have been created simply to limit our consciousness? Since childhood, you've heard the famous, "Let there be light." But what existed before that? What existed before the creation of day, night? The very concept of a beginning. The Bible shows us time as a line that begins in Genesis, but there are forgotten texts, banned, ignored, erased, that tell a much deeper, darker, and more real story. If you feel like traditional religion hasn't revealed everything, if something inside you has always suspected that the mysteries of creation go far beyond what was taught from the pulpit, then you're in the right place. Because what you're about to discover now may surprise you, and may never let you look at time the same way again. Stay with me until the end, because there's a revelation that has been hidden for centuries. A revelation about the exact moment time began to run, and why it may never have existed in the heavens. Maybe, just maybe, heaven isn't a place that happens like here. Maybe the divine throne isn't stationary in a timeline, but rather floating in an eternal dimension where past, present, and future are just fragments of what we call reality. And if that's true, what does that say about our destiny? Now get ready, because what comes next could change everything you thought you knew about the weather and the sky. And if heaven really is outside of time, what does that mean for our existence here? Is time just an illusion, a subtle prison that prevents us from remembering who we really are and where we came from? These questions don't have simple answers, but that's why we're here, to unravel, layer by layer, the mysteries of creation together. And on this journey, your voice matters a lot. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what's touched you most so far. Have you ever felt like time is limiting you? Or that there's something greater, eternal, trying to awaken you? Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content that has been hidden for centuries. When you like the video, YouTube understands that this message needs to reach more people. And when you subscribe, you show that you're part of this journey, this search for a truth that pulses beyond the visible. So if this resonated with you, don't hesitate. Like, comment, and subscribe, because together, we're rebuilding something that was fragmented, and what comes next may open even more doors to what was sealed from the beginning. Because now that we've touched the edge of this mystery, we need to go deeper. But what if everything you call past, present, and future is just a perception created to organize your experience here, on this limited plane, where matter needs sequence, cause, and effect? Is time really something that exists? Or is it just a reflection of our mind trying to understand what is beyond our capacity? When we talk about time, we're talking about more than clocks and calendars. We're talking about the invisible structure that regulates everything. Your decisions, your regrets, your memories, your hope for tomorrow. But what if this concept only existed here? What if heaven, the real heaven, operated in a completely different reality where everything's simply an? Think about it. If the eternal has no beginning or end, how could he be within time? If hence beginning and the end, then he is also the interval between them. Doesn't this give you the feeling that perhaps our idea of time is an adaptation? As if our consciousness were shaped to function in a theater with scenes, acts, turns, but outside of it, the plot is simultaneous, eternal, indivisible? And then another question arises. Why were we placed within time? What is the spiritual purpose of this limitation? Is there a hidden impact on how we deal with the passage of time, especially when we don't realize that we may be immersed in projected illusion? Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Imagine the sky as a sphere that rotates outside the clock, where the verb is not conjugated, where there is no expectation or longing, because everything's simply this, where the now is not a moment, but a permanent condition of existence. In this dimension, the very concept of transformation changes, because there is no line to be followed. Everything is already in, and consciousness just aligns with different facets of that eternity. And this may explain something even more mysterious. Why there are biblical passages that depict beings who do not age, who do not change, who observe but do not interfere, as if they were part of a system beyond change. These figures appear from Genesis to Revelation, always there, as if time had not touched them. They are eternal witnesses, guardians of hidden truth that resist the passage of millennia. Have you ever felt disconnected from time? As if something inside you knew there was more to reality than the hands of a clock suggest? This feeling isn't uncommon, and it could be a sign that you're beginning to awaken to something greater. Because time controls us, but it also conditions us to forget who we are. It distances us from eternity by trapping us in a sequence of events. But if we can remember that we come from a place where time is non-existent, perhaps we can begin to change our mindset, our choices, our perceptions. Perhaps we can begin to access a dimension where truth is not learned in parts, but understood as a whole. And at this point, a silent but powerful revelation emerges. Time may not be the beginning of everything, but rather a consequence of something that happened up before. A primordial event, hidden behind the scenes of creation, that thrust us into this chronological experience. It's as if time were a veil, and the sky, the space where that veil never existed. Therefore, certain decisions you make don't come solely from your history, but from something much older, something that vibrates outside the timeline, something that calls you back to what you once were, and perhaps still are, in a dimension where everything is happening to the same time. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. At the beginning it says, "And there was evening and there was morning the first day." A simple, almost poetic phrase you probably heard many times. But what this passage really shows us goes far beyond a common counting of hours. It reveals the very moment when time was introduced into creation narrative, as if God, by separating light and darkness, was shaping not just space, but the very compass of existence. The mention of afternoon and morning is not just an aesthetic detail. It is a delimitation, a line that emerges, cutting through infinity and creating for the first time a chronological order before that everything was presence, eternity, pure vibration. With this phrase, time begins to breathe and creation submits to it. But this raises a disturbing question. If time begins on the first day, what existed before it? Genesis itself seems to silently admit that time is not the basis of everything, but a subsequent layer, a mechanism that came into play when material creation needed sequence. And here's a detail that almost no one talks about. The creation of time was not marked by a celestial tick-tock. It was marked by asymbolic division, light and darkness, order and chaos, the visible and the hidden. This separation was not just physical. It was spiritual. It was the beginning of the journey of consciousness within a world that now had a beginning, a middle, and an end. This perspective changes everything, because it invites us to view creation as a code, where each verse, each word, is a piece that conceals a deeper truth, a hidden truth that, when revealed, transforms not only our perception of the world, but also our mindset, our decisions, and even the meaning of our existence. Time, in this context, is not a gift. It is an instrument, a system that allows us to experience growth, transformation, cycles, but that also separates us from eternity. Eternity, by its nature, cannot be divided. It cannot be measured. It cannot be counted. What is eternal simply, Anne? And when the Bible speaks of an eternal God, it is speaking of a consciousness that exists outside this gear that binds us, outside the days, the nights, the years. But here comes something even more intriguing. The very structure of time as we know it, 7 days, 12 months for seasons, is deeply connected to biblical symbolism. The 7 days of creation, for example, are not just a narrative about how the world came into being. They are a spiritual matrix, a cosmic pattern that repeats itself on different scales. 7 musical notes, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 spirits before the throne, as if time, from the beginning, were a secret language, a cycle carrying coded messages of divine origin. And when Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am," he's not just placing himself above the lineage of the patriarchs. He's breaking with chronology, declaring his presence in a dimension where time doesn't limit, doesn't exhaust, doesn't separate, where everything is contained in eternal I am, and not in the I was or I will be. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this rupture between human time and divine eternity also appears in other passages. For example, when we read in the book of Revelation that time shall be no more, this does not mean the end of existence, but a return to the original state, where time will no longer be necessary, where creation will be reintegrated with the Creator in a reality that transcends counting. Does this change the way you see your own life? Because if time is a temporary structure, then it doesn't define you. It only guides you until you awaken to what lies beyond. And this awakening is more than a belief. It's a remembrance. It's as if something inside us already knew this, but forgot it upon entering this world. Perhaps, for this reason, time is also an invitation to realize that the eternal is not far away in some inaccessible place, but here, now, hidden between the seconds, waiting to be rediscovered, like an echo that resonates from Genesis to this day, calling those who can hear. Comment here. That makes sense to me. What existed before the first day? Before the counting, before the separation of light and darkness, before any order that time could offer? The Bible begins with the beginning, but even that beginning is relative, because before let there be light, there was already something. A silent scene, vibrating in pure existence, where the Spirit hovered over the waters, not to act, but to observe, as if waiting for the exact moment to activate time, and with it, history itself. But here's the point no one talks about. Time is not the first element of creation. It is actually a response, a consequence of something prior, something that happened in the invisible. Time is activated that after the divine presence manifests itself over the abyss. In other words, there exists a dimension where time does not yet reign, and it is in this pre-creation that one of the greatest enigmas of existence resides. This before time is not a void. It is a field of infinite power. It is there that the mystery resides. Because when the Spirit hovers, he is not creating. He is observing. He is discerning. He is perhaps contemplating the infinite possibilities of a world that has not yet been revealed. And this leads us to a powerful revelation. Time only begins to run after the decision to create is made. This changes everything, because it means that heaven, the true heaven, can be this reality before time, a space where there is no past or future, only eternal presence. And this presence doesn't move in lines. It pulses. It vibrates. It is. This perception opens space for another reflection. Whether time was created after, then it is a tool and not a natural condition of divine existence. It's as if God had constructed a chronological stage so that certain things could happen in an order, in a sequence. But outside this stage, the show is already complete. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this before time is not just a theological idea. It's a spiritual key. Many mystics, over the centuries, have spoken of a region that predates creation, a space where light had not yet been separated, where unity reigned. It is called the primordial light, or Ein Sof in the Kabbalistic tradition. This light has no shadow. It has no form. And that is precisely why it needed to be contracted to make room for time and matter. This concept of contraction, Khaled Simpson, states that God stepped back to allow creation. He created a space where something Gudakal exists. And within this space, time became necessary for consciousness to move, develop, and make choices. In other words, time is not merely physical. It is a reflection of separation. It is the path by which the created being can return to its origin. But this also means that time is intimately linked to the illusion of separation. It makes us believe that we are far from the source, that something is still missing, that we need get there, when in fact, everything is already here, just fragmented into moments. This hidden truth completely changes the way we view our own journey. Because if we understand that time was created as a didactic process, a path for us to experience inner transformation, then we can begin to use it consciously. Instead of being prisoners of time, we can be its navigators. And this has a direct impact on our mindset. When you begin to realize that certain feelings of déjà vu, sudden intuitions, or vivid dreams may be echoes of a consciousness that existed before time, everything takes on a new dimension. You stop seeing life as a rigid sequence and begin to perceive the behind-the-scenes nature of this creation. You begin to realize that certain decisions don't just come from your history, but from an older memory, one that predates your own entry into time. It's as a part you never left this eternal place, and is trying, in every way, to remind you who you are. Perhaps that's why, in certain moments of deep silence, you feel like you already know something, even without having learned it, because you already era, even before it existed. And now, By touching this mystery, you can begin to see time differently, not as an enemy, but as a teacher, as a messenger, as a portal. Write it down. Time did not begin with me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when we look beyond the traditional biblical text and begin to explore the forgotten, banned, suppressed writings, what they call apocrypha, heresies, reserved mysteries, the notion of time begins to dissolve like mist before the light. The book of Enoch, for example, brings revelations that completely challenge our linear perception. He describes places where time does not flow as it does here, but pulses in spiritual cycles. There are passages where Enoch is taken to celestial regions where days and nights do not exist, and where angels operate in another order, not temporal, but eternal, an order where what happens neither begins nor ends. It's simply an. And this is a hidden truth that runs through several profound spiritual traditions. Heaven, in its essence, does not obey time. It is beyond, before, and after. The Zohar, the central text of Jewish mystical Kabbalah, speaks fulmination of divine light as something that springs directly from eternity. There, it is said that time is a garment, something the divine uses only to interact with creation, but that in itself, he remains naked before eternity. This symbolism is powerful because it shows that time can be seen as a kind of descent, a lower layer of reality, an adaptation made so that beings who have fallen or been separated from wholeness could find their way again, as if time were a map within a maze, useful for those who have lost their way, but useless for those who are already at home. The Gospel of Thomas, another text excluded from the official canons, contains an enigmatic phrase from Jesus. Blessed is he who was before he was. What does this mean if not a direct reference to a pretemporal existence, a consciousness that precedes birth? The flesh history these writings, ignored for centuries, point to an idea that, deep down, has always been alive in those who dare to question it. Time is not the origin, it is a consequence. And eternity is not the future, it is the source. Heaven is not in tomorrow, it vibrates outside the clock. This is why so many wise men speak of the eternal now, because time is just a lens, and these lenses were placed over our eyes when we cease to inhabit fullness. It's as if creation were a fall from eternity into time, a contraction of absolute presence into fragments. And in that fall, something in us was broken, but something was also sown, because with time came purpose, the chance to remember, the journey back, a path of a beginning, a middle, and an end so that we might one day, once again, access that which is neither beginning nor end. These forgotten texts weren't banned by chance. They shake up structures, already established narratives. They open too many doors, raise too many questions, liberate too much. And perhaps that's why so many of them are buried, so that no one would dare remember that the sky was always here, waiting to be rediscovered beyond the ticking of the clock. Imagine now that time, as you know it, is merely the surface of a much deeper ocean, and these writings, these ancient fragments, are like cracks through which the light of eternity still escapes. With each revealing sentence, you feel something awaken within you, a memory that doesn't belong to this life, but that vibrates with the same frequency as what they call their spiritual home. Comment here, time is an ancient illusion. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the symbols that appear in the most mysterious visions of Scripture are not there by chance. They were not placed there to be deciphered with human logic, but to provoke another kind of understanding, one that does not fit within the rational mind, but pulsates directly in the spirit. Ezekiel's vision is a prime example of this. He speaks of a wheel within a wheel, with eyes everywhere, following a throne that moves as if it were alive. But notice, these wheels have no beginning or end. They turn, but they don't follow a path. They move, but they have no destination. It's pure movement, without chronology. They don't move from point A to point B. They exist in a kind of eternal dance that defies the idea of linear direction. And the eyes? Hundreds, perhaps thousands of eyes spread throughout the creatures, the wheels, the wings. What would they be if not the symbolic representation of a total consciousness, a full vision of all things at once? Because those outside of time do not look at what will come, sees the whole, sees what was, what is, what will be all in a single instant. The gaze of eternity does not need to foresee. it simply contempla. And the throne, it moves. And this is something profoundly revealing. The throne of God, which many imagine fixed in a distant heaven, is described as mobile, as if the throne itself were not a place but a state, a consciousness that could be in any dimension, at any time, or rather, in addition of all moments. These symbols reveal that in heaven there is no time, there is presence. There is a kind of fluidity that does not depend on past or future. It is as if heaven operates with another physics, another structure of reality where movement does not create consequences, but expresses essence, where displacement is not geographic or temporal, but vibrational. And this brings a new way of seeing our own journey, because if we are made in the image and likeness of the Creator, then we also have potential to access this symbolic reality, this place where everything already exists, where we don't need to wait nor rush nor remember, just awaken. Perhaps that's why so many spiritual masters talk about inner silence, because time makes noise. It rushes, demands, but eternity whispers. It's in no hurry because it doesn't need to arrive. And when you become silent, you begin to listen. You begin to see beyond the hours, beyond expectations, beyond what was programmed. What these symbols show us is that heaven, the true heaven, is not a still, frozen, immobile space. It is a living organism in constant vibration. But this vibration is not measured in seconds. It is measured in consciousness. It is the quality of being that defines reality there, not its duration. And this brings a hidden truth with enormous impact. Perhaps humanity's greatest mistake has been trying to measure the eternal with temporal rulers, trying to understand the spirit with stopwatches. Because the moment we try to fit the divine into chronology, we lose the sense of revelation. And it was precisely at this point that many became disconnected from true wisdom. The symbolism of the sky is an invitation to expand our perception, not to decipher it logically, but to feel it deeply. The wheel within the wheel, the eyes, the moving throne, all of this speaks of another way of existing, of a vibrational structure where every detail contains a universe, where nothing begins because nothing ends. Write it down. I see beyond time. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because if time was truly created solely for us to experience, then it is not a universal reality. It is a local experience, something tailored to the limitations of human consciousness, a space where our choices can mature, where the cycles of life patiently teach us what, outside of time, would be impossible to understand. Think about it carefully. Everything you feel, plan, or fear is tied to some notion of time. Longing is tied to the past, anxiety to the future, regret to what has already been, hope to what is yet to come. But what if these emotions are merely side effect of a soul that once lived outside of time, and that misses the fullness that this state offered? It's as if we've adapted to a simulation where everything happens sequentially, but our origin still vibrates in the eternal, and so we feel incomplete, as if something is missing, even when everything seems to be in place. It's an inner echo that whispers, "You don't belong on this count." This hypothesis raises another layer of hidden truth. Time may have been a portal, a divine tool to help us cross the abyss of oblivion, not as punishment, but as a process, an interval between what we were and what we will be again, a journey delicately designed so that we can, step by step, rediscover what was never lost, only hidden. And if this is real, then heaven is not distant from us because of location, but because of vibration. Eternity is not far away. It is hidden right here, in the interval between one second and the next, in the awakened consciousness that observes time passing, but knows deep down that it itself does not belong to this flow. This is why certain spiritual experiences, such as altered states of perception, lucid dreams, or a moment of profound silence, make us lose track of time. Because in these moments, perhaps without realizing it, the soul briefly aligns with what is eternal, with that which has not begun and will not end. Maybe time doesn't exist in heaven, because heaven is a place where time never needed to be born, where everything just stands without progress or delay, without youth or old age, without deadlines. And then, the question that haunts us completely changes form. It ceases to be what is in the sky and becomes, why did we leave there what was so profound, so necessary, so impactful, that it pushed us into a reality that demands past, present and future. Perhaps time wasn't imposed, but chosen. Chosen by souls who knew that only through it could they achieve a kind of transformation impossible in pure eternity. Because in eternity, everything is plenitude, but also immutable. And here, everything changes. Everything dies. Everything is reborn. Everything reveals itself little by little. Here, there is pain, yes, but there is also learning. Here, there is a fall, but also a return. This is the sacred paradox. Time is separation, and as a bridge. Time is a veil and as a path. It hides us from eternity, but also leads us back to it. If we know how to look with the right eyes, if we realize that each cycle lived is more than a succession of days, it is a secret language, a disguised call, a reminder. Write it down. Eternity still calls me. Now I won't go even deeper into this subject, because if time isn't a prison, perhaps it's a passage, a bridge between ignorance and revelation, a necessary interval between what we've forgotten and what we're ready to remember. Each day lived, each cycle completed, each transformation we undergo may be part of a script much older than we imagine, as if we were walking a road written before our first breath, but with the freedom to choose how we'll navigate it. And in this scenario, everything takes on new meaning. Pain, which once seemed like punishment, reveals itself as a tool. Delay, which so often generates frustration, reveals itself as synchronicity. Pauses, which seem like waste, reveal themselves as protection. Because maybe, just maybe, there's an intelligence hidden within time, a code that can only be deciphered by those who don't try to defeat it, but rather to understand it. Eternity is still there, untouched, whole, silent. But time is the field where we plant the seeds that lead us back to it. It's no wonder the Master is called a here and now sacred, because it is here, in this specific moment between heartbeats, that we have the chance to wake up, to break the pattern, to decide again. And when this awareness awakens within us, we begin to see the journey differently, no longer as a succession of successes and failures, but as a map carved into the soul. We begin to realize that each encounter, each loss, each choice carries the breath of something much older, something that was there in the beginning, before time began to flow. But this story still has pieces that haven't fit together, because not all beings have adapted to time as we have. Not all accepted this separation with the same intention. There were those who refused the plan of the fall, who were torn from the divine presence even before the creation of man, beings who not only knew the timeless heaven, but were also expelled from it. Comment here. Time has taught me to remember. If you made it this far, it's because something inside you recognizes that this journey goes beyond words, that there's a calling, a memory, a seed that perhaps time hasn't been able to completely erase. And if this content resonated with you, if at some point something vibrated within you, then this space is yours too. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, not only to stay up to date on the next chapters of this investigation, but to keep this connection alive. Here, we don't seek ready-made answers. We walk together through mysteries that many prefer not to touch. Leave your comment saying, "I'm with you until the end." Only then will I know that you didn't just watch, but walk with me until the very last second. And if at any point this video truly touched you, please leave a like too. It's like a light shining on this path, and helps this message reach those who also need to hear it. And now, to continue this journey, there's a video here that complements everything we talked about. Click and stay with me there, because the mystery is just beginning.